Well, good day, everybody. Welcome to the Lifetime Training Podcast. I have one of the, if I shouldn't say one of the, I said the original OG of Pilates. I hope you don't mind me throwing it out there like that. But Mr. Sean Gallagher. Sean is the owner and founder of the New York Pilates Studio. He also owns the largest collection of archived material from Joseph Pilates himself, which is written into 3 different books: The Pilates Method of Body Conditioning, the collected works of Joseph Pilates, as well as the Joseph H. Pilates Archive Collection. And through the years and through this, just one of a kind knowledge that he's got and that he's pulled from these archives has really created the very first professional Pilates certification course, which is considered the gold standard still to this day. So I am absolutely honored and welcome you to the show, Mr. Sean Gallagher. Thanks for coming.
Jason, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
I'm not sure I'm the Mr. Pilates guy, but I've spent a lot of time trying to, keep Joe's work alive and the way he wanted it and the way he wrote about it and the way he, the archives, he spent a lifetime. It's a lifetime of work, and he documented that lifetime of work and that system of his. And that's what I have. And that's what we're really trying to maintain. So, to keep it alive for the next generations to come.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, I think it's just something that has been around for years, obviously. And
over 100.
Yeah. And I think you're seeing it, unfortunately, I say this, you're seeing it becoming a little bit more popular because professional athletes are starting to do it. And you're starting to see people who are in elite shape take themselves to a whole nother level by doing it. So, before we everybody always likes to talk about the elite. Let's go back to the beginning and just say, for those that are maybe not interested right now, hopefully by listening to this after that, they will get interested. But if you could explain, what is traditional Pilates, the way that Joseph, created it?
Well, Mr. Pilates, when he developed his exercise system, he was born in 1883 in Germany. And in Germany at that time, you had gymnastics part of the educational system. Mm-hmm. Gymnastics pretty much started in Germany in the early 1800s. Originally was developed for, exercise to get men in shape to fight the war. They had a revolution in 1850, and most of those turners, they were called turners, which are gymnastics, and they were on the losing side. They all emigrated here to the U.S. So all over the U.S., you'll find old turner, organizations that were based on, that whole process. So the exercises weren't necessarily new, but what Joe did is he approached it in a totally different way of looking at it, because that's much more about building muscles and muscle groups. And Joe looked at babies and animals and tried to figure out how they learned how to move. Yeah. And that's how he developed his system. And his system doesn't work like the traditional system, where if you want to get stronger, you'll always have to increase the resistance. Mm-hmm. Because the apparatus that he invented with springs, right? That, one of the geniuses of Joe was he started using springs before anybody was using them. And if you look at research on muscle, right, they're always in the research on muscle, they're always talking about the spring property of muscle, right? So when you look at how you want to develop muscle, well, how does a muscle work? The spring and the muscle work very similar. Mm-hmm. And, when you look at Nautilus or you look at Cybex, they were trying to develop a way to have 100% of, or the maximal amount of strength throughout the full range. Mm-hmm. The problem that I always had with Nautilus, but especially Cybex, if you saw somebody walking down the street doing what they ask you to do in a Cybex test, you'd think they have a neurological disease, because it's full max and they're like all over, and it's all this stuff. And it's, if you had to do, that's just not how we work. Yeah. And Joe really looked at how we work, and he found and movement really requires a stability and a mobility all the time. Yep. And Joe's apparatus found the balance between stability and mobility. Love it. And he put that in every exercise, because he changed the springs and the gears and things like that to make it so for most people. And again, when I talk about working with people, I talk about a bell curve, right? And at either end you have extremes, right? You have extreme flexibility, you have extreme tension, but most of us sit somewhere on this on that bell curve, and we're all a little bit different.
Yep.
And so his system is really designed to facilitate most of that, right? And balance that out as much as possible from the arms and the hips, the shoulders and the hips and the powerhouses. You know, he talked
Yep.
about the center of gravity, the powerhouse. So sometimes when you do less springs, it makes you work harder.
Yeah.
Right. And traditionally that just, you know, that doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
And, you know, I have a really good story. When I, in 1990 or 91, we were at a physical therapy conference. I'm also a physical therapist.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying, and not to interrupt, but you know, you also, what I love too, is got an extensive background in physical therapy and other forms of what we would consider fitness, if you want to call that, an exercise. So it's not a, you know, just a very narrow approach.
Oh no, listen, I've studied, you know, I'm a
Yep.
Feldenkrais practitioner. I have a master's in nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I went to India and studied with Iyengar back in the 80s.
Wow.
You know, I went to England to study Alexander technique.
Yep.
I've looked at a lot of different modalities. I mean, I studied acupuncture in Korea and in Vietnam.
Wow.
You know, I've gone around the world, tried to study different things and different modalities and different movement and try to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Pilates for the normal healthy adult, there's there's really nothing much better than that as far as I'm concerned, because it you know, if you look at Feldenkrais and you look at Alexander and you even look at yoga,
Mm-hmm.
they're all great. The difference is Pilates does have the resistance.
Yeah.
And the resistance is not just to get bigger muscle, it's to be able to get better integrated.
Like that.
And he also, because he looked at babies and animals, he pretty much, you know, the PTs in the 50s started looking at how to help people learn how to move better from injuries and dysfunction. And they came up with a developmental sequence, you know, developmental learning and basically looking at how, same thing Joe did 50 years before, which was look, how do babies learn? How do we learn how to move?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who taught you how to move?
Nope.
Right? It's organic. It's built into the system. And most of us go through this sequence. And, you know, the whole thing, if you don't use it, you lose it. Well, Joe's system puts back all those developmental sequence positions and strengthens you in all those positions. But it doesn't just strengthen you, it strengthens you in balance. So it's a balance between stability and mobility, mm-hmm. which is what we need. And then when you put all those things together, no matter what life throws at you, you're better, you know, you're much more functional, you know, and, you know, when you see today, you know, everybody's talking about functional exercise in the gyms. Well, 30 years ago when I was in PT school, they didn't talk about the core. They didn't talk about functional exercise. None of that was part of the vocabulary. That hasn't really happened until Pilates started to become more popular, because that's what it does. So when you look at all those different things and you look at what is Joe's work, what is traditional Pilates, that's really what it is. And, you know, there is an order. You know, in his studio, he had, you know, different apparatus, and next to each apparatus he took pictures and he put them in an order. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you came in, you would get a private, but you could also come in and just work out, and there would be your pictures and you would go and you'd follow the order and do your workout. And there was little cards that everybody had. So he had a system, he had a way of doing things, and had a way of working.
And you purchased too, right? You purchased that actual studio. Is that correct?
No, what I did is I'm the fifth owner of the original Pilates studio business.
Got it. Okay.
Right. And that studio, and when I bought it, I bought, you know, what came with it was all the business records. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of those cards at the time when I bought them, they were like 50 years old. I threw them out because I didn't think I needed them. Now I'm like kicking myself in the butt because there are all these people that we could have gone back and looked at. Yeah. But, you know, they're, you know, hindsight. But, you know, I also bought, you know, when I bought the business, I bought the trademarks. Mm-hmm. You know, the trademark, it had been trademarked 12 years before I even bought it. Mm-hmm. And it had been, you know, the previous business owners had also tried, you know, protected the trademark, you know, sent the letter, because when you have a trademark, somebody uses your name, you have to send them letters, you have to ask them to stop, you know, you're the bad guy because you're sending letters to people. And so I just did what the people before me did, but then I did it, you know, it was starting to grow. So I had to do it more than they did because there was only a few people, then now there was more. So, and I ended up losing the trademark. So that was in 2000, you know, and then since then, because up until that time, you know, I bought the business and the trademark in 1992. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I did was develop a training manual. Then I started opening up centers. You know, I opened up LA, Chicago, Seattle, Atlanta, Philadelphia. I started open. I had partners in, I still have a partner in Brazil. I had
And
partners
you're in New York too. So, I mean, that's
I
where
was in New York. I was in New York for sure, but I was, expanding and growing that way, trying to put it out there.
Yeah.
And so up until the trademark, if you wanted to call it Pilates, it had to be pretty much what Joe taught. And, what happened was when Joe died, it was left to his wife. There was a will and everything was left to his wife. And then she sold it to a group of investors, 939 Corporation, which is, and they were trying to keep their gym going, right? Because Joe had died and he was the founding force. And it, wasn't as busy. So they bought it out. And then Romana Krzyzewska, who was my teacher, she was brought in to manage and run the studio, and she ran it while they owned it. And then they sold it to Aris Isotoner, the guys that make the gloves, right? Who was also owned by Sarah Lee, right? So we get into a corporate thing. So they had it for about 2 years. They were looking to expand and make a franchise and all that, but it wasn't making money. So they divested.
Yeah.
And then they sold it to Wee Tai Home, who was another client at the studio. And then I bought it.
Got it.
So then I started to, and all through that, Romana was the person who, helped manage and run the studio.
And Romana was taught directly from Joseph
from
Pilates,
Joe,
correct? Yeah.
And also, she spent, when she took over the studio, Clara was still there. So Clara was teaching her to make sure that she had all the information.
Got it.
Right. Other teachers that are out there, that went out, they're called elders, people that had studied with Joe.
Yeah.
Some of them were students, some of them were teachers, some of them were teachers for a short period of time, some were for a longer period of time. But Romana was there, she was the model for him when she was a teenager. She got married and moved to Peru. I think it was Peru. I can't remember, somewhere South America. And then she came back in the 50s. And then she was there for almost 10 years, before Joe died. And then she was there with Clara for all that time, getting the information. So to me, she was the most knowledgeable, right? And she had the archive. She ran the business. She had all that information. And so that's what she did. So she built that up and she kept that going. And so she traveled all the way through all those businesses. And I did the same. So her and I worked together and there had been a training program before with Wee Tai, but it was just basic. It had just the reformer and the mat.
Yeah.
I included, reformer, mat, all the different apparatus as well. And and then we modified it into a basic, intermediate, advanced.
Yep.
Because Joe didn't really do that, but you didn't walk in and do the advanced exercises the first day. There was a progression. So we codified that so that it was, a way to teach. And being a PT and a Feldenkrais and all these other programs, I understood how programs work. So I tried to I wanted to make it a professional program, which is what I did. I made it very professional. We had the Pilates Guild, which was the organization that is for teachers, so there was all of that went through. And then we progressed it. And then when I lost the trademark in 2000, well, Pandora's box. I mean, anything and everything can be called Pilates, and today it is. I mean, that's, to me, Joe's name is everywhere.
Yeah.
His method is not.
Well, and how, for those out there, that might, are really interested in understanding the original form, how do you help them differentiate? How would you know, whether they're doing what was the traditional form versus the evolved or, form based on whomever developed it?
Right. Well, so when you say the evolved form, there's so many evolutions. I don't know. I mean, you can go out tomorrow and put any exercise together, slap the name Pilates on it and say, I'm teaching a Pilates certification.
Got it.
So what's out there, I just really don't know. So to find, and even classical nowadays it's a generic term. So now that it's becoming popular, right?
Yeah.
What's happened is that now everybody says I'm classical. So if you take one workshop and somebody did a classical exercise, you can say, oh, I'm classically based.
I got it.
So again, it's very difficult, and the trademark provides, a place for quality, whatever that is, and a standard, and that's what we had, and then that got lost. So it's really a buyer beware, and that's what I think today. It's really difficult to tell anybody what to do. I mean, I have a training program, and I've continue to do that training, Romana's training ever since. We do things at what I've recently done is in 1997, I bought Joe Pilates property in the Berkshires.
Okay.
And that property had his house and his studio. And in his studio, it had his original equipment.
Oh, wow.
So I've just pretty much, we're 95% done rebuilding his studio. And I'm making it into a half museum, half workout place. And eventually, the goal is to, his dream was to have a training place where people would come in the Berkshires and exercise and learn his system. Well, I'm making that dream come true.
That's
Because
awesome.
he had one studio and he was building another one, and then things got, then he got too old and he died. So he died.
When do you
He
think that's going to be done?
Not in his 90s. He died at 83.
Yeah. When do you think that'll be done?
It'll be done next year.
Awesome.
For sure. I mean, the studio will be done. We're now starting, since the studio is pretty much done, it just needs some labor. I'm focusing on their house, which is in total just repair, because basically when they sold the property, the people who bought it built a house on the property, and they left his studio in his house and they didn't do anything to it. So no roof after a while. So when I got it, there was water damage. The roof was rotted. Everything was rotted out. I had to do there's been a lot of work, and I've had a lot of help from a lot of great Pilates people and students and things like that have donated money, time, and effort. And we've all come together and rebuilding this to make a studio. That's great. But so, that's one of the things that I've done is, trying to do that work and put it all back together so that there is a source, and I've trademarked the name, the Pilates Source, or the JH Pilates Source, Joseph H. Pilates Source, so that people know they want the real thing. There's a place that they can get it. Got it. Because everybody else has all sorts of variations. And, this takes us to the would Joe change it, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you read his writings, he pretty much felt he had the answer. And he says it. He says it many times in his writing. And if you look at the archives, I have photo shoots from the different apparatus, like the Wonder Chair, which was a chair that was, it was an exercise apparatus that was literally a chair that you have in your apartment with cushions. You could take the cushions off, put the chair down, and have 70 exercises to do on it. Wow. Right. So,
that would be great for right now, huh?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He was, he had a whole line of home equipment in the 40s. Wow. He had the bench mat. He had the spine corrector. He had the junior reformer, which was a reformer that would fold in half. Yeah. Right. And, and he had the Wonder Chair, and he had posters. And so you would buy the equipment and it would come with a poster and you could do your workout. And the mat was the same way. So he did all this, 70 years ago. Wow. 70 or 80 years ago, he was already looking at that. And, it's interesting because, he lived through, a pandemic. Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And so they knew about, so again, how do you do that? We have the luxury today because we have what we're doing right here, which is virtual. Yeah. Well, 50 years ago, you didn't have that option. No. If we were to shut down 50 years ago, the gyms and everybody else, and even though they still closed gyms, you had the ability, a lot of teachers had the ability to do what? To do virtual training. Yeah. You didn't have that, that even when Joe was, even 30 years ago, you didn't have that.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because it's funny with everything, not everything, but a lot moving virtual. It's really a foolproof to get through anything that's really thrown at us, unless there's some type of internet outage, right? Then we're done. But outside of that, what I've seen is a lot of older, more experienced trainers that get stuck in their ways are now being basically deterred. They don't want to deal with the virtual side. And my question to you is, you yourself do virtual currently, and is that correct? And how have you been, for those trainers that are listening out there, how have you adapted how you're able to actually teach through a virtual environment?
Well, there's two things there that to me that are important. I am not a believer in teaching teachers how to teach virtually this work, because Joe's work is very hands-on. Yep. And you can't do that. And, learning has three levels, right? You're either tactile, visual, or audio. Yep. Well, we can't do tactile. So the only thing we have is visual and audio. And even visual is limited because, if I'm there, I can walk up, look right where look at the feet. I can look at what's going on. I can see a lot better. It's three-dimensional. This is two. Yeah. So what I always say, it's the next best thing to being there, right? It's like the old AT&T ad, right? Yep. And so it is what it is. And I think if people already know, it's a lot easier to continue to teach them. Like, I do a lot of teaching, and when everything shuts down, I get more teachers to come and do the training, the classes, because they have nothing to do,
Yeah.
because they can't work as much. Or if they're working virtually, they're not working like they're doing the studio. You're not doing a 6-hour day in the studio. You're doing 1 or 2 classes a day.
Yeah.
So I have, so you're able to teach, I think, people that already, if you already had clients and they know what to do, I think you can do that. It's not the best,
No,
but
exactly.
at the same time, it's better than not exercising, right? I mean, because, if you just sit around and do nothing, all the health issues, the psychological issues, and everything else that happens, I think we still need to exercise. I think we still need to, support and do that with everybody. So, if you're old school, and I'm old school, I'm not a big believer in virtual for training. I don't do.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for this to end so that I can start my training again, because I'm not doing my training right now.
And when you say training, though, you're trainer to be an instructor, or
yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and what I was talking about too, it's a great clarity. 100 and 200% agree there. But what I'm saying is, you've been able to take and work with clients,
Right.
meaning not the trainer or the person who wants to become a Pilates instructor, but working with at-home clients virtually is something that has evolved. It's not as good as being in front, but it's a viable solution to help people get through this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the next best thing to being there, right? It's not what you want. It's not the best.
Yeah.
Right. I would much rather, and even with my PT, I'm a manual therapist. I work with Dan. I've worked on Broadway. I've done over 180 Broadway shows backstage as the therapist. Wow. I've worked at New York City Ballet, Pennsylvania Ballet, David Parsons Dance Company, Paul Taylor's dance company. Beautiful. I've done lots of different things. I started the therapy program at Juilliard. I've done a lot of stuff with performers, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm a hands-on guy, and I get in there and I work on it, and it's manual work and it's re-education. Mm-hmm. Well, I can do the re-education. I can't do the manual work. Yeah. I can't put my fingers.
Yeah. We haven't figured that one out yet, right?
I can't do those things. I can't feel whether, how you're using those muscles, right? So, I mean, it makes it difficult.
Got it.
But at the same time, I'm able to, give the other half, which is a big part of it, right? And, if somebody really needs hands-on, sometimes you need to do that. And it's interesting because in social media, I see a lot of times the Pilates teachers get all bent out of shape because it's like, well, how come the therapists can see people and we can't? We're healthcare, people need this. And it's true, but the difference is, right, as a PT, I've been trained, how to do the mask, how to do the cleaning, all that, that protection stuff. That I've known that since in my basic training in PT school. You get trained in all that stuff, right? Because you're medical. Mm-hmm. Pilates, I think most of the personal trainers, they don't necessarily get all that, right? Yeah. And the reality is that they can still exercise virtually. Yeah. But if they're having a physical problem, they can't. They need manual work. Well, I can't do that virtually. Yeah. And as long as you do the right protections, you can make that happen. I personally am not doing that, but I know plenty of therapists that are. Yeah. And there's the telemedicine, but then there's also the ability to be able to still see the patients that are in dire need for that type of treatment. Yeah. And if they don't need it, you just give them a home program and you give them the workout that they need, and or send them to the trainer or to the Pilates instructor and say, you just need some good Pilates, you need good workout. Go do that right now until you're ready to see. If that doesn't help, then maybe we can get you in to be seen for if that's not really working for you. But try that first.
Got it. Well, the question I asked earlier too, maybe this is a better way to rephrase that is, obviously you have a great, amazing training program that people go through, and when they're done, you give them the stamp of approval. What is that called? Like, that's what I'm getting at, is what ways can, if somebody is searching for it, I know they still could go off on their own, but there's got to be a couple things that they can look into to try to figure that out.
I think, first of all, and you need to understand that these other programs, they may be good. I don't really know. Yeah. I'm not saying that they're bad. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying they're not Pilates. Yeah. And there's that I think that needs to be defined, because a lot of times when I say that, people think, oh, they get offended thinking that I'm saying what they're doing is not good. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm teaching Joe's work, and this is what we do, and this is what we're trying to do. And, the program that we started, it has, you need 70 prerequisite sessions before you start to be able to get in.
Oh,
Right.
wow.
So you're, you can't just like show up and say, I want to teach Pilates.
Yeah.
You have to already have done it. Right. And you have to have a record of that so that we know you have, a basic understanding in your body as well, because I'm not there to teach you Pilates. I'm there to teach you how to teach Pilates. There's a big difference.
Yeah.
Right. Big difference.
Yeah.
And so you already have to know Pilates when you come. So that's number one. Right. Number two is that when we, the program that I have and that many have imitated, right? So there are other ones out there that are similar, and they're probably, and I think they could probably do that. The second thing is I have there's the didactic, workshops where you come in and you learn the exercises and how to teach the exercises and all that. And that takes about 12 days or so, 9 to 12 days, depending on how it's organized. And it's taught not by apparatus, it's taught by the system.
Got it.
Right? Because you have, 5 or 6 main pieces of apparatus in a studio, and those are the main things that you get trained on. Well, when you have those apparatus, if you try to teach the reformer, and then you try to teach the Cadillac, and then you try to teach the magic circle, and then the one that and you do that separately, you start thinking that way. And the system, Pilates is not just exercise, it's a system. And so everything's interrelated. So when we teach the first workshop, it's the basic system. So you get all the different apparatus, and you also understand what you do on one apparatus, you can do on another apparatus, on another apparatus, on another apparatus. And the movement is very similar, but the relationship to gravity is different, and the relationship to the springs and gravity is different. So one, if somebody's having difficulty understanding the movement, you can do it in different configurations, right? And the brain likes that. The brain, variation, but basically doing the same thing. And eventually, then you go back to where you started, and they can usually do the exercise now because you've done it in these other places. And that's really teaching the system. And then there's basic, and it's, you do the basic training, then you have to do 200 hours of apprenticeship, right? And that's observation. And then you go and do intermediate, and then you have 200 hours of helping to teach. So you're helping other teachers teach in the studio. And this is one reason why I'm not doing it, because I don't, the studios are being closed, and, you can't really do that well.
Yeah.
And then you do, after the intermediate, then you have your 600, you do your advanced, and then you have 200 hours, more. And that's teaching under supervision. So you're teaching with a teacher there supervising you, and you can ask questions and do all that stuff. And then, at 200, at 400, and at 600, right, you get tested.
That's awesome.
So, and you have to, and the test is both practical and written, right? I mean, there's, the PMA, which is a Pilates organization, they have a test, but it's just written. Well, this work is not about written. This is about doing. So you need a practical.
Well, and I don't want to go down this tangent, but that's my issue with recently, over the last maybe 10 years, maybe more, maybe less, give or take, there's been, in the fitness certification realm, there's been the accreditation, and the accreditation only accredits that the test out procedure is fair and just, and it doesn't actually allow you to do a practical test out, which baffles me.
Well, and listen, as a PT, when I got licensed as a PT, I had to take a practical. Right. I had to take 3 practicals. I had to do a cardiovascular, I had to do a musculoskeletal, and I had to do a neurological. Then you'd get a patient. There'd be 2 PTs. You'd walk in, they give you a problem, and one would take notes, another one you'd have to treat.
Yeah.
Well, they got rid of that because they said it was too objective.
Yeah.
Or no, it's too subjective.
Too subjective. Yes.
Too subjective, but it's not objective, right? Which, I get it, but the problem is our work is subjective. Right? It just is, because everybody walks in is different. You're going to do something different. And it doesn't fit, A, B, C, D, E, which is the
protocol.
best. Yeah. It just doesn't do that. And that's the problem. And that's the PMA is trying to follow that same thing. And to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. 100%.
So, so that's happening across the board because that's easy.
Yeah. Exactly.
That's very easy
Yeah.
to do. It's like, here's your written test,
Yeah.
and then they give you a study, a study guide, and it's a 95%,
Yeah.
success rate, practice. So like, what does that
Well,
really
and
say?
don't get me started on the dollars and cents that it costs to
Right.
get through the. Okay, so
Oh
we
yeah.
could
Well,
let's move forward.
it's
We
all
digress here.
dollars and cents. And
Yeah.
this is what's, and
So
that's the difference.
yeah.
Well, look, here's the thing, with the trademark, right? There's always a winner and a loser. Well, the winner gets what? They get all the money. The
Yeah.
loser doesn't.
Yeah.
So the winner was, the equipment manufacturer and the PMA. And what are they doing? They're making all their money, but they're not doing, Joe's work. And they've opened up that box, Pandora's box, and everything and anything's Pilates now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's good, maybe it's bad. But Joe had a very, and again, going back to Joe, his exercises were very specific. I think if he was alive today, what he would continue be doing, he would be continuing what he was doing all the time, which was inventing new apparatus to get people to be able to do his exercises the way he wanted them to be done.
Awesome. That's great.
And that's, because, what's the issue with, as a PT, one of the biggest issues, is compliance. And the reason for compliance is usually two things: time or space or place. Well, Joe did all that 50 years ago or more because he had a chair that was your chair. I'm sitting in a chair, I get up, I put it down, I can do 70 exercises.
Yep.
He, had a home reformer. He had a, the gym in the wall. He had a bed, the bednasium, right? You'd wake up and you'd had springs attached and you do all your exercises on your bed in the morning. So he took care of that process, right? And that's really the case. So, and I think
crazy that has not evolved. That somebody hasn't taken it and evolved. But
and here's the thing, right? If you have an exercise and you're asking, I want a specific thing to happen in the body, and this exercise doesn't, well, then why do I need to change it? It works.
Yep. And
he, Joe spent 50 years tweaking and fine tuning his system, and it worked. He was like, and you read his writings, like, my body, my students, I know it works. I've shown it works. I do all this stuff. So I don't, and like I said, the archives, I have, photo shoots from like every 10 years. Right.
Yeah.
And guess what? The exercises are the same. Maybe hands a little different and this and that, but pretty much 95% of the exercises are pretty much the same. So, if, and he was a creative guy. Yeah. So if he was inventing new stuff all the time, wouldn't he put it in his new photo shoots? I mean, who wouldn't do that? Yeah. So, he felt really good about what he was doing. And, that system does, it does what it says it's going to do pretty much. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, and for those out there, that history lesson right there in the last 25 minutes is fantastic. And I think anybody in the fitness industry really should drive and listen to that and understand that. But, a couple questions that I've got too, as we move forward is, obviously could be intimidating, and intimidation is again, we'll go back to subjective. It's the subjective thing, but we see in the clubs that I've been in, where they have the Pilates studios, predominantly female, but males are starting to come in. What would you give from an advice standpoint of the general people out there that are potentially questioning or concerned or intimidated, whatever it is, in how over the years have you dropped that barrier down to get more people into it?
Well, I mean, it's a couple things. One, I remember when I was first putting our studio together the first time in New York, and some woman walked by and she looks in, she goes, "This looks like a medieval torture chamber. You guys must have been reincarnated and you're coming back."
I'm glad you kept that PC because I could have went a lot of different ways.
Back to help people instead of hurt them this time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I just thought that was funny. But, when you're looking at that, Joe, I have, let me show you. Like when you went into the studio, there were books and assignment books, so all the people who came in. And there's a lot of men in here. Yeah. Throughout the years, it wasn't, everybody thinks it's a dancer's thing. Yeah. Joe originally was brought over here to work with the boxers, and he worked with boxers. His studio was at 939 8th Avenue, which was like right down the street from the old Madison Square Garden. Then they moved it down to 34th Street. Before that was uptown. So he opened up where the boxers were to be able to work with boxers. And there's some film with him working with boxers. the dancers didn't get to Joe until the 30s. He immigrated in 26, opened his studio in 26 or 27. It's not really 100% clear.
Yeah.
So at least for 5 or 10 years, he was working with, other people, not just the dancers. Once the dancers found out about him, because in New York in the 30s and the 40s, the dance world was not, it was in New York, it was still bigger than anywhere else, but it wasn't that big. You had a few companies and there was, maybe hundreds or a couple thousand. Yep. Now there's probably tens of thousands of dancers in New York, but back then it was much smaller. So and it's typical, like when somebody would have a problem, and you hear their oral history, like, well, I had a knee issue and this dancer said, have you gone to Pilates? Do you know about Pilates? So everybody the people to know would send them, and then they would go to him, right? Because Joe didn't just exercise. He also did, you have to realize PT as it is today, where you have PT practices on every corner, right? Or a lot of them, 30 years ago. And even before that, PT was in the hospital. Private practice was not the norm. It was the rarity back in, when I started in the 80s, it was a rarity. Before that, it was hardly anybody. It was just mostly in the hospital. So
and when you say PT, you're talking physical therapy, not personal training. So I just want to say
physical therapy. There was no, place for people to go and get the hands-on manual work and that type of thing. And even then they didn't do that much. Physical therapy is really named by the modalities. They were physical modalities that you use for therapy. The stim and the ultrasound and all that kind of stuff. That's how it got its name. So you didn't have that. And so Joe was that kind of guy. And for the dancers, he did it mostly with hands-on exercise, and he would guide you. And if it was related to imbalances and patterns, he could fix you.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's interesting because when you look at you're talking about athletes, I did athletic training in college, and everybody had to do football, and I was like the guy with the earrings and leg warmers back in the 80s. I got a lot of flack. Let me tell you. Having to take those football players.
You got to show those pictures, man.
So it was a different time.
Yeah, exactly.
But athletes, what do they need? They need flexibility. They need strength. They need balance. So it's the same thing. And, throughout the years, there was always athletes, there's athletes that were going to Joe, and even in different teachers are, it's just now there's more of them.
Yeah.
But it's not new. You think it's like this new thing. It's not, it's been, there was, if you look at the articles that have been written, not journals, but just like in magazines, from the 70s on, you see that there was different athletes and different people going, and it wasn't always just women. It tends to be more women, but more women do what? They exercise a lot more than men do when it comes to lifting the weights.
Yep. Right? So bringing this back, Pilates, in essence, Joe's first bigger group of people were actually boxers, which obviously were primarily men back then, especially.
Right. I don't think there were any.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Not in the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah, exactly. And so, again, and then, the thing that baffles me about our population, it's us, maybe it's human nature, and that we put an expectation on ourselves that we should be good at something when we've never actually ever done it. And it's so frustrating in a way, because we shouldn't do that. Our kids do that as we grow. And obviously the skill of learning Pilates and the movements is a skill. Obviously why you need 700, you're asking for 700 sessions before you could even
70.
Oh, 70. Oh, I'm sorry. 70 sessions before you even come in to try to be an instructor. So, those are the things that I tell everybody out there is, hey, listen, don't expect that you're going to be great at this. It's actually going to challenge you in a way that is going to make you move and feel and just be better, but it's going to take some time.
Well, I mean, look, when it comes to movement, whether it's Pilates, whether it's yoga, whether it's a dance class or aerobics class or whatever, part of it's the teacher, right? It's definitely, the energy of the teacher, and you meld, does it connect?
Yep.
So I always tell my patients, because I'll have patients and I'll say, Pilates, and they're like, well, I tried that once and I didn't like it. I said, well, you need to try it with 2 or 3 different teachers, first of all, to make sure that it wasn't just the teacher that you didn't like. Because I can tell you that, when I was looking into, taking care of dancers, the way I got into Pilates, because I read an article in GQ magazine about Pilates, and it was this exercise system that dancers used to stay in shape and prevent injuries. Well, that's what I went to PT school to do. So I was like, oh, I got to go find out about this.
Yeah.
And I got off that apparatus and I was like, I felt so different compared to anything I'd ever done. And I was in PT school learning the free weights, learning the Cybex, learning the Nautilus, learning all these different things. And nothing affected me the way it did on that apparatus. Yeah. So, one of the things if they've never tried it, they should at least go and try, not necessarily the mat, but the apparatus, because that, it makes you feel a certain way. And when you get off, if you had the feeling I had, you're going to be like, okay, I need to do this.
Yeah.
So, and even though, I wasn't good, you're not going to be good the first time at anything. But if you do something that makes you feel good, you're willing to keep coming back to, to get better and get the results, because it will give you those results for most people. I mean, nothing's for everybody. I mean, that's just the reality. You're not going to find, if it was, we'd all, Pilates would be everywhere and that's all we'd be doing.
Yep.
And the reality is, no matter what kind of exercise you do, if you start exercising, you got the endorphins, you're stretching, you're strengthening, you're going to feel better. The question is, how long can you do that for?
Yeah.
Right. So
and feel better. What does that mean? Right. Mentally, you'll feel better, but in time, if you're bodybuilding,
you get, but you're putting balance back into the system. A lot of other things don't do that.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. So, and, the reality is, can you lift that amount of weight for a lifetime?
Yeah.
You can do Pilates for a lifetime. The system is designed so if you do it, it's maintenance. It is, you got to put maintenance in the body. If you don't do maintenance, you start here, you go up here, and then you slowly end up back where you started. You're in a nursing home. Somebody's feeding you, bathing you, clothing you, all that stuff. Or, you get up to here and you have, life gets in the way and you're going like this up and down. And at the end, what do? You die.
Yeah.
Right. So you can either go up and slow descent or do the maintenance and stay up there. Now, there's lots of ways to do maintenance, and strength is part of it. But Pilates gives you the strength and flexibility at the same time. Right. Yep. And traditionally in exercise, you can't do that. Why? Because if you're trying to do one muscle, you're right. You can't do strength and flexibility at the same time with one muscle. But Pilates works the whole body. It's always a full body, because movement and function is, all the muscles are always working. They're just doing different things.
Yeah. And that brings up, kind of two questions that I think you were hitting on, and two things, but I want to say it pretty bluntly is one, Pilates was one of the first to really bring about the concept of training movements as opposed to individual muscles. And in the fitness industry, that's becoming more popular. Whether the application of that is true or not, we can, again, just like different Pilates methods, it's all over the board. But that's one big one. And then secondly, how does the Pilates and incorporating that into, some people have been doing a traditional strength training, cardiovascular training program, and how the Pilates can complement it so that you stay more on the top of that curve as opposed to, coming down quick.
Well, first of all, Joe, right, even said, we don't do weights, right? He, when Joe had his method, people were going and lifting weights back then too. Mm-hmm. And he basically said, that is not Pilates, because it wasn't. And so he, it was never about, the muscle, and look, that's eye candy.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he wasn't toned. Mm-hmm. I mean, I got pictures of him when he's doing certain things, and, he's ripped, but he's not big ripped. He's just, he's just
long and lean,
well toned and good. Yeah. And so when you're looking at that process and you're saying, well, I'm used to weights and I'm used to the cardiovascular. Well, I can come to me, and I'll get you to an advanced workout, and we'll do it in a half hour. And then you tell me that you're not getting an aerobic workout. Now, you may not be getting an aerobic workout to run a marathon, but for life, I can guarantee you're sweating, you're breathing hard, and we're gonna focus on the breathing and help you get better at breathing, as well as all the other things. And you're going to get a great workout, and you're going to sweat really hard. And that's the difference, because they don't understand that process. Like when, I have a great example when, like I said, Romana, we went to this PT conference, and, this young PT comes in, he's probably in his 20s, and she was in her 70s. Right. And there was a winded chair, and there's an exercise called the pull-up. And you have to basically pull up, and you pull up from your center, your powerhouse, your core. Right. And this was like 1990. So we're talking before people were talking about the core in the gyms or anything like that. And he came in, all burly and like, and there's little old ladies like, what is this crap? Show me what this does, right? She goes, okay, honey, come here. And she goes over to the chair and she does this pull-up, right? She goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And then she goes, okay, you try it. And he gets on there and like, he doesn't understand it and he can't go up at all. He can't do it. And he gets off and you can see him. He's getting red. He's getting pretty upset because this little old lady is showing him up and he's Mr. Strong Guy.
Yeah.
Right. So then, he goes, show me that again. So she goes, okay, honey. She goes over and she does it again. And then he goes and he can't do it. Then she goes, well, let me show you how. And then she taught him. And then by the end, it took about 15 or 20 minutes, but he could go up. He was still wobbly and couldn't do it. But that's, and then he was kind of like sold. He was like, okay, I want to learn. How do I learn how to do this? Because, she showed him that he had, that he didn't have a strength in his core and he thought he was super strong.
Yeah.
So it's a perfect, that's a perfect kind of example of that process. And so what the best I think I can tell anybody listening is, you got to try it, and if you try it and do it and, try one or two teachers. If the first one you don't like, try another one or two, try, give a couple sessions. And it's either, and again, it's not for everybody, but most likely you're going to find that it's going to work. And what it does, right. It, if you're still, even if you're doing weights, it's going to inform you how to use yourself better. So that when you use the weights, you're going to have, because Pilates first is alignment, right? All the apparatus is square. You lie somebody down on an apparatus, well, they're either off or they're not. And so what does the teacher do? Our job is to keep everybody square. And then we do the exercise. And I always say, we try to get the best balance within the imbalance because, people have bony, anomalies and twists and turns and, anteversion, retroversion, tibial torsions, all sorts of, Q angles, everything's not, that anatomy picture that we see, the anatomical position, 0.0001% of the population has that body.
That's funny. Yep.
Right. Everybody else has, on that bell curve has something else. So the whole point is, and when you look at balance, right, like, here's the screen, right? If I stay within this, if I stay within my screen, I don't have pain. But if I go outside my screen, then I start to have problems. And so here's balance. So what happens is people skew to one side because, when I say, balance is a fallacy, because are you right or left-handed?
Right-handed.
Okay. So are you balanced?
I guess
right-handed. So one hand works more than the other, not balanced. So it's a fallacy. And so, so here's center. And we're always off a little bit, but it's when you get past that end, you go out of that, that's when you have problems. Pilates always tries to get you closer to this. You're never going to get perfect. Yeah. But the closer you get to this, the less likely you're going to have issues. Yeah.
Right? And balance, and you're speaking in terms right now, because somebody maybe toned out of the conversation, balance in left to right and not like balance. I'm standing and being able to balance. It's just keeping your body in balance.
All of it. Yeah. Well, that's all of it. I mean, perfect example for, balance and finding your balance. Okay. So when they go to test balance and they do research on balance, you know how they do it?
I don't.
They put you on a platform and then they move the platform, right? Well, what's the reformer? No. It's a moving platform. So Joe built in, right, that, that the inner ear, the vestibular system, challenging that inner balance, by having an apparatus that has a platform that moves.
Man, you're making me want to just go out and get on an reformer right now.
Well, you should.
That's awesome. Well, and the thing that came to my mind when you were talking, I didn't want to interrupt, but it was, you may do strength training and you may look good, but that isn't applicable a lot of times, meaning you can't apply in its truest sense the maximum efficiency of what your size is actually doing. So it's almost Pilates is the application of whatever it is that you have in the real world.
Well, and look, I've seen guys that, they got so much muscle, they can't scratch their head.
Yep.
That's not that, and again, that's a look. And if that's what you want, that's great. But, and can you do that for a lifetime? No. Right. Those people, how many, 80-year-olds are looking, with those huge muscles. Come on. It's just, well, Joe, when he's 80, he was still really toned and pumped.
Schwarzenegger and Stallone are pretty close, but what they're not lifting.
They're not as big as they were when they were really pumped. Yeah, right. And they have all done Pilates.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
Right. So what does that tell you? And look, there's so many things out there, but if you want something, and again, it's about consistency.
Yeah.
Maintenance is about consistency. If you don't do it, you're going to lose it. And that's the beauty of Pilates, is that it allows you to go for, there's some people who never get past basic, some stayed intermediate, some stayed advanced. The super advanced stuff is really only for the dancers, the acrobats, and that, or the people who are like really want to do that. But again, you don't see, 80-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 60-year-olds usually doing the super advanced. They're basic, intermediate, advanced workout. And it's an amazing, great workout. Joe's whole philosophy was, I'm as in better shape than most 20-year-olds, and flexibility and strength wise. And especially in today's world, for sure. Because, when we were kids, I don't, at least when I was kids, I was out running around. I wasn't doing this all day.
No, exactly.
Right? Looking at the screen, doing this all day. And my kids are more like that. So,
well, it's funny too. Yeah, mine too. I've got a 13-year-old, and I was just saying to him the other day, it looks like he's almost forming a functional scoliosis because of the way he sits and
yes, of
kind
course.
Of
well,
so
if he's sitting that way, he has a functional scoliosis.
Scoliosis. Yeah.
If he stays that way too long, then it becomes structural over time. Yeah. So, again, and we are all about habits and habituation. We accommodate and habituate to our environment. That's what we're really good at, whether it's good or bad. And what Pilates does is it helps you, every 2 or 3 times a week, you reset everything, and it helps your nervous system understand that balance again, and it feels good for most people.
Love it. Well, man, I can't thank you for your time, and the amount of knowledge and just history is just fascinating, and hopefully we've inspired a whole lot of people as they listen to this thing when it releases to get out and give it a try and follow some of the things that we've said. But anything else you want to leave us with, or any message that you have to the audience, whether it's a trainer or a person just listening, general population that's looking to improve their health?
Well, look, the fountain of youth is good exercise and good diet, period. That's it.
Yep.
And when I look at Pilates, like I said, I've studied lots of other forms of movement, and they all are beneficial, and I use them in my PT. But when they're somebody gets injured, whether it's chronic, or acute, right? Football is acute, dancing is overused chronic. I have to retrain, and then once I retrain and I get them out of that acute stage, that pain stage. And I do my exercise, whether it's Feldenkrais or a little bit of yoga or even some Pilates. But then eventually, what do I want to do? I want them to, go take your Pilates session. And, I pretty much, I don't have any research, but 70% of the people I see, 80%, if they had been doing Pilates, guess what? They wouldn't have to come see me. Right? Because they would have been balanced. And that imbalance, whatever the imbalance was that started causing the pain and dysfunction. Yeah. If they were doing a maintenance program, and again, Pilates isn't the only one, but like I said, I think it's the best, and after studying all these other things, I still, for what it does for resistance and building strength, like nothing else does that doesn't have that, it's better than all the things that don't have an apparatus, and all the other apparatus is still better than those apparatus, I think, for life. Yeah. Now, if you have specifics, that's a different story.
Got it. Well, man, again, I am super grateful to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And I know that you've been doing some trainings, on and off with the Lifetime Pilates instructors, and we greatly appreciate that as well. And, Eduardo for making this connection, who's our, national director of Pilates. So I can't thank you again. And hopefully, I wish you the best. Let me know when that Berkshire thing happens, because that sounds like a whole lot of fun. And
you come up and visit.
Up there. Yeah, for sure.
Well, the other thing that we've done, just one other thing is, we haven't been able to do it this year, but we, Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, which is where Joe used to teach there. That's how he ended up in the Berkshires.
Okay.
They now have housing, which they didn't used to have, and they built this great new building. They had one building just burned down, which is terrible. Yeah. So we're going to be helping them with a fundraiser, so what we've been doing is Pilates at the Pillow. And so what I've been doing is, with Elaine Ewing and I, we together, we've been bringing back lost apparatus, right? So the things that were lost for 50 years that nobody's seeing, either from the archives or from other things, we've reproduced it, or I have the original.
Yeah.
And we're bringing them back and inviting Pilates teachers. We have teachers coming from all over the world, from all different schools, because,
Yep.
they're studio teachers, and we want them to be able to start teaching Joe's work.
Yep.
And so we're bringing back the apparatus as well as the exercise, and facilitating that in, this amazing space now. So
Oh,
if you
sweet.
come, I'll invite you on one of those weekends.
sure.
It'll be good.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. And I wish you the best. And hopefully we can open this thing back up here soon and get some more training.
The vaccine's on its way.
Yeah.
So hopefully
Yeah.
by summertime, we'll be ready to go.
Very good. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, Jason, thank you. Thank you, Eduardo, as well. I mean, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's, I think it's important to be able to get the information out there and let people know that there are differences. And if you want Joe's work, there is a source, and you know where to get it now.
Yeah. And that's the goal of this podcast too, is to get trainers and general population, but it's a little bit geared towards people who want to get into fitness or training to hear it from the right people. Because there's so many people out there that, they're doing their best, and I'm not bagging on them, but with Instagram and TikTok and all this stuff, and we have a generation of people that are up and coming and learning from them, which I always say, if you want to learn how to get to 2 million followers, great. But if you want to learn, the tried and true practices, you might want to look elsewhere. And maybe these people, and the ones that have 2 million and have also done that, that's what we want. But I just want to bring you guys more to the forefront so that more people understand.
Well, I've always been a believer. I went to India to study yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the Pilates studio to study Pilates. I go to the source.
Yeah. Because
that's where it started, and everything else is somebody else's idea, and they've added stuff, and it might be good and it might be bad, but it's not the original. And if the original was that good, usually the modifications are just a way to market themselves and change it so they can be different.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want the real thing, go look for the real thing.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Likewise.